We're going to get started in just a couple minutes, but while we're waiting, please introduce yourself with your name, where you're joining from, and a little thing that brings you joy these days. I always love this portion. We always see like where everyone's joining from, familiar names. If you're just joining, please introduce yourself with your name, where you're joining from, and a little something that brings you joy these days. Anka is joining from California, Oakland, and the rain. Yes, the rain is also bringing me joy down here in LA. Bobby from Charlotte, 3D printing, cool. Dave Britton from Idaho, playing Celtic music, lovely. Brian, calling in from Seattle. Days are getting longer, Moss is thriving, and that makes me happy. Yes, the Moss always makes me happy here in LA too. Hello, Gavin. Hello, Chad. Welcome, welcome. Oh, hello, Sarah. And if you are also just joining, please introduce yourself in the chat, your name, where you're joining in from, and some little thing that brings you joy these days. This winter for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, summer and those of us in the Southern. Wes is joining from snowy St. Louis, enjoying having the kids around on a snow day. Oh, that sounds fun. Boris grabbed a coffee from my local coffee place across the park, had a delicious sausage roll. Nice, nice. All right, we'll get started in one more minute. I can see a lot of people still filing in. We had 300 people plus registered today, which is a bit more than usual. So it'll be a nice, lively chat. Hello, Brian, Dave, Bruce, Arturo from Seattle, enjoying snowboarding days in the mountains. Lovely. Hello, Shadrach, one of our DWeb Camp fellows from Ghana. Hello. And Ben from Morocco. Hello, hello. All right, let's get started because we have a pretty full schedule and exciting conversations to be had today. So welcome to Blue Sky and Beyond, our February virtual meetup. My name is Mai Ishikawa Sutton. I am senior organizer with DWeb Camp and DWeb Projects. You can always email me, follow me on Blue Sky and the Fediverse. I've been involved with DWeb since 2019 and helped draft the DWeb principles. All right, so because we have a lot of folks here who might be new to DWeb, I wanted to do a little introduction to what DWeb was about. So DWeb is a project connecting people, projects, and protocols to build a decentralized web. We facilitate in-person and virtual meetups like these to share ideas, approaches, and resources to decentralized infrastructure and governance across the entire network stack, from last mile connectivity, protocols, platforms, and everything in between. Let me pause here for 1 second. I think I'm seeing a limit on the number of people who are able to join, but I think I could be wrong. If I could talk to my co-host here, because I am not seeing more people in the waiting room.
I'm curious what Zoom account this is using, if it is set for large meetings.
Right. Oh, no. Okay. That might mean that we have a limit of 100 people. Wow. Unfortunately, we might have to just keep going. I really regret not catching that before we did this. Okay, people are looking into it in the back end. We are recording this, and we will be sharing our slides and everything. So hopefully that will be Okay. All right. So I'll keep going. If you'd like to learn more about what DWeb is, we have our DWeb principles, which you can read. These principles guide our work and all of our gatherings, so please check those out. All right, so the game plan for today, we are doing our welcomes now. We have our announcements of upcoming events, and we have our 3 presentations from our speakers, then Q&A with the speakers between them, and also you will have an opportunity to ask your questions. And we will conclude this formal presentation. Then what we're going to do is try and do a Discord meetup after, where we'll be using the voice channels to just have conversations, meet people, meet new friends, see familiar faces. So I'll give details on that at the end of the hour. So pro tips for using Zoom, please make sure you're on mute and that you're in speaker view for the best view. And as always, share your questions and comments in the chat. Our code of conduct, we always have a code of conduct in our spaces, and this includes our virtual meetups. Let's treat each other with respect, be open to new ideas. We will not tolerate any harassment. If you experience anything of the sort, please email us at ethics@archive.org, and you can also check out the code of conduct at the URL shared in the chat. All right, so quick announcements. This weekend is Lo-Fi Hack for Local First Apps and AI taking place in San Francisco on Saturday. And this weekend, I'm actually going to be in Taipei along with our fellowship director, Not True, to be co-organizing a workshop on resilient connections at Taipei Tech University on Sunday. If you'd like to join us, if you find yourself in Taipei, you can RSVP at this Airtable. And this training we're offering at no cost to these frontline activists who are fighting internet censorships where they are. So if you'd like to support us, if you are a fan of DWeb in general, if you're a fan of this virtual meetup, you can support this particular fundraiser for our workshop this Sunday at our Open Collective. Next month, we have Atmosphere Conference, that Boris will be sharing more about, which is taking place in Seattle. And also this summer, Why Hackers Yearn. A few of us are going to be at this hacker camp in the Netherlands, and we are exploring whether we want to have a little activation and village at this hacker camp. So if you're planning on going or if you're interested, please email our creative director, Ira. All right, so today's meetup, Bluesky and beyond, where we'll be talking about Bluesky, the app protocol, and efforts to build an open, interoperable ecosystem of social networks. And first up is Brian. Brian is a protocol engineer at Bluesky. He previously worked at the Internet Archive collecting scientific research data sets and publications and created scholar.archive.org. Prior to that, he attended Recurse Center in New York City and helped start an engineering design company in Cambridge called Leaf Labs. Take it away, Brian.
Hi. Really great to be here and see all these friendly faces, at least of the my old colleagues from the Internet Archive. So to start, like Bluesky is a company, just to make that clear, we're a for-profit company. The history of the company is like a little convoluted. A lot of us actually met each other. Like I met Jay for the first time and my coworker Paul at DWeb camp events or other the DWeb summits, I guess, in San Francisco from early on. This is great, kind of like coming out of this community. The history of the company, I'll just like kind of gloss over a little bit, but it's a for-profit company. It came out of Twitter. Some of the early funding was R&D funding from Twitter, the company, not from Jack Dorsey as an individual, to fund protocol development. And so we spun out. Jay was able to negotiate. We're a completely independent company. At this point, we have no relationship back to Twitter or to Jack Dorsey. So it's a company. It's a public benefit company, but which gives us a little stakeholder independence, but it doesn't. We're still basically a company, and the mission is to develop large-scale technologies for decentralized public conversations. That's kind of like where we're coming from. Could you go to the next slide? So we develop a product, Bluesky, which people are, I would guess, familiar with, but we also develop a protocol. And so our kind of philosophy is to do these two things together. It's not one serving the other, or neither is kind of on top. They're both feeding into each other and making the other successful as we go. And when we set out, we were able to look at a lot of previous protocols. A lot of us have worked on earlier social web protocols. I worked on the DAP protocol, where a lot of us have worked with ActivityPub, and we're able to study ActivityPub and other, looking at the web and seeing what happened. So we're able to come in. We're not super doe-eyed or innocent. We think that there's lots of bad actors on the internet. We have to build something that will resist re-centralization, will resist pressures from external parties and things like that. So we were able to kind of come up with a set of values and goals for the protocol as we started designing it 2 or 3 years ago. And some of those kind of principles of what we're trying to hit, so these are kind of our theory of change of what will, if we can hit all of these goals, we think that the protocol will improve outcomes for individuals and communities on the web. So just as at a high level of those, and I'll get into these a little bit in detail and kind of like what our progress on them is. One is that really sticks is just individually people own their own identity and data. They can take their identity and data with them and move them between providers. So they're not tied to a specific provider at any point in time. People should have choice. They should have algorithmic choice. So they should choose what kind of content they see from the network, and they should be able to choose alternative providers to see different content. They shouldn't be locked into a single algorithm or a single feed. So we're not a no algorithm shop, or our philosophy isn't like no algorithms in the network. Our philosophy is that you should be able to choose. There should be multiple providers, and individuals should be able to choose what they want to see. Similar to that, people should be able to break up moderation into components, and there should be multi-party moderation. So we do a fair amount of moderation work ourselves, but other people should be able to contribute to that work without permission or direct coordination. We have an open protocol, so other people should be able to build entirely different applications. People should be able to inspect. People shouldn't fear that we're going to enclose any other work that they would try to do. A big principle for us is credible exit as part of our decentralization story. I'll get towards in the end. And related to the open protocol, we want to be a foundation for new apps. I'm not going to talk about that last point very much, but I think Boris will get to it in his talk later. Next. So just as a quick overview of some of these, I'm not going to dive into deep detail of these, but we've largely delivered on this owning your own identity and owning your own data kind of promise. So part of that is you can set up your handles are not necessarily tied to a specific service provider. You can bring your own domain name and use that as your handle. What's your username in the network? So we have examples like senators. We have a number of senators. We have a number of heads of state at this point of time, and they kind of self-identify with the domain. So like a .gov or a .senate.gov domain kind of tells you this is actually a senator, like the US government signed up on that, or New York Times. And now some reporters get under New York Times, so you can see which that kind of like attests to verifies their affiliation with that institution. There's also a separate identity system called VIDS, which is a W3C standard that underlies all the identities. So you can change your handle without changing your whole identity. And then separately, the protocol has this repository data structure for doing authenticated transfer of data between services. And that makes it very easy for users to take backups or other people to mirror or archive data in the network. Next. One of the big components for us is this control your scroll kind of composable or customizable algorithms. And this has been fairly successful. We have a relatively simple API, and at this point, there's tens of thousands of different providers doing algorithms. Some of these are topic-based, so if there's a science feed, there's a Moss feed I use a lot. There's kind of jokey feeds of like people using a specific pun or people talking about their dreams or things like that. And then there's more serious feeds where people try to come up with a like recommendation algorithm or try to synthesize content from multiple feeds into one unified feed. And this works. People can run that kind of service just running a feed. They don't have to run account hosting. They don't have to touch user identity. They don't have to touch any of these other things. They can provide just a feed if they have an opinion about how that should work. Next. One of the newer components of the protocol that we're still working on is this composable moderation concept, which lets other providers have opinions in the network. They can receive moderation reports. They can emit moderation actions in the forms of labels. For now, this is somewhat limited in that the Bluesky moderation service is still somewhat of a special case and has additional powers. We're working to make it so other people can run full featured moderation services as well, especially if they're running their own infrastructure like an app view or other API server behind the scenes. But we already have this system in place. It's running. It's been some ups and downs. We need to iterate on it, but it's definitely like proven the point where, again, people can run their own just a moderation service without having to run a large amount of infrastructure or take on other kind of burdens in the network. Next. And so how does this all kind of fit together? So there's a lot of components. This is a diagram from one of our papers describing the protocol, and it's just kind of a mess if you're not used to the protocol. But the point of this is kind of like there's lots of individual pieces and they can be swapped out. A question that comes up a lot is Bluesky, or is App Proto actually decentralized? There's been a lot of back and forth on this. It gets into like, what does decentralization really mean? And our kind of philosophy on this is we want it to be a decentralized protocol. We want to devolve power out in the network. We want to have lots of other people, but we're not in a lot. Often what that means is a lot of individuals wanting to run on small servers in their home and have almost a peer-to-peer network. Like the extreme case would be everyone running everything on their phone, which is how the Scuttlebutt protocol worked earlier on. We think that there's some challenges in a network that require specialization. There's certain roles, there's certain harms, there's certain kinds of investigation that need to happen that really require specialization. We don't think everything can be really devolved down to individuals. The key thing is that there shouldn't be only one specialized organization or one person doing that, but there's some role for a team of full-time people that need their own revenue and resources to run that kind of resource. So that's like more advanced harmful moderation, for example.
Quack.
Sorry.
I said quack. One more minute.
Okay, quack. Okay. One more minute. So we also think re-centralization is like the default. So we need to design to prevent re-centralization. And a lot of popular features require large centralized infrastructure. So search or discoverability in the whole network. These things require larger servers and are hard to scale down to phones, for instance. So our approach is to, instead of trying to atomize everything down to teeny devices, is to focus on what really matters. And this is to be able to swap out any individual component. So as demonstrated with the moderation and the feeds earlier, the design is that you should be able to replace any specific thing and substitute without having to provide everything all at once. And that we call that credible exit for any component in isolation in the network. So that's part of the approach. The last thing I'd say is we really focus on public data. We really respect privacy. We think a lot of people shouldn't be doing everything openly in the network all at once, but public data has a special role in society, in our civics, in politics, in movement building, in inter-community discovery and formation. And it's been somewhat neglected. There's lots of protocols and there's lots of services that serve the group chat private data need, but public data has been somewhat neglected, so we focus on that. Okay, you can skip over the last slide. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Brian. All right, so we are going to just go through our presentations first. And so please hold on to your questions, and we'll be getting to the discussions after Boris's presentation. All right, so next speaker is Mallory Nodal. Mallory is the Executive Director of Social Web Foundation. She is a technology and human rights expert specializing in internet governance and digital policy. Mallory is active in internet and emerging technical standards at the IETF, the IEEE, and the UN. Her background in computer science and civil society brings a unique perspective to the intersection of technology, policy, and human rights. Take it away, Mallory.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate seeing some friendly faces in the chat. I'm new to this community, but I've heard about it for a long time. So it's really nice to be talking to you all today. And it's great to see that we have a lot more folks joining. So it looks like the Zoom size problem got solved, which is really awesome. So yeah, as you mentioned in my bio, I am here because I work with Free Air Feeds, which is up on the screen for folks. But actually, I wanted to talk a little bit first about how I got here and why, the Social Web Foundation is involved. So some of you might be following a little bit of my work with the Social Web Foundation that I launched with Evan Perdomo back in August. We're mostly working on ActivityPub. So why are we here in this meeting about AT protocol? You might be wondering. I'm going to get to that, but I just wanted to forefront that Social Web Foundation was launched and I apologize for the background noise. If you can hear that, that's my bad. We wanted to grow the Fediverse, right? In any way that we can. We want to center users and users' needs and the need for something new when it comes to social media. So we focus on the network of platforms that are connected via ActivityPub, but we are supportive of efforts to make other distributed social networking protocols more open and equitable, because we want everything to be interoperable. Like, that's the end goal. And that's why I got involved in free R feeds. So you'll notice that there's like a real theme here. Behind my work in this space. I started out as an activist and really care deeply about social movements and their ability to thrive both online and offline. And so I'm just a community builder. And so where I see the opportunity to bridge both technically and socially, I take the opportunity. So let me get into a little bit more about the Free Our Feeds campaign, since I think a lot of people joined wanting to hear about that. So Free Our Feeds kind of takes what Brian has already set up. We've got Bluesky, folks are using it a lot, but at the same time, it's one company and it's essentially one application, it's one experience. It has this openness to it, right? Where folks have published how it works, similar to both Facebook and Twitter. No, I don't think I can actually say X is this way, but right, you can build on it with an API, and you can do really cool stuff with it. And that is kind of what interoperability achieves as well. Like, don't forget, interoperability is not just peering services that work together. It's also all the intermediary functions and things that you can then build that, because you have this scale and because you have these interoperable functions, you can actually then create things like, search or find your friends or moderation and things like that. And they work across different tools. So anyway, getting back to Free Our Feeds, the idea is that in order to create this really robust ecosystem that's also independent and isn't necessarily captured and controlled by one central entity, we need to make good on this promise that the AT protocol will be open and there will be lots of people using it. So there are some really specific things that Free Our Feeds wants to do. First of all, it needs to raise money, because I'm sure, as you folks are aware, that running large, massive social networks are expensive, and we want to be able to also re-grant to the community of workers and organizations that might find it interesting to build on AT protocol, that have started building on ActivityPub and so on. So that's one of the main purposes at this stage, but then where does it go from there, right? The idea is that the Free Our Feeds organization, group, coalition, something, the custodians like me are trying to figure that out, and we'll take the rest of the year to do so. We would hand that sort of funding off to this entity that would be, and this is the important part, entirely separate from Bluesky. So, we're all colleagues here, we're all working together. That's the point. We're building a community. But in terms of legal, financial, and governance ways and means, Free Our Feeds would be setting up something that is separate from Bluesky. So let me do a time check, because I wanted to make sure that I get to a couple of important ways that you can get
2.5 minutes.
involved. So I want to talk, maybe before I get into ways you can get involved, I just wanted to expand our collective imagination for a moment about this. Because again, like, what's the relationship between ActivityPub, which has been around for a long time? It actually is an open standard. It doesn't have intellectual property requirements behind it, other than it's open, so you can't try to control it. And AT protocol. I think, again, like, we want to think about all the really hard problems that would come with like a completely open web. So for some of us, like I can see on the call, there are internet engineers on here and web engineers, right? We know the pitfalls and the difficulty with totally decentralized openness, right? It becomes really, really hard to move together, to scale. Maybe scale isn't the problem, but maybe figuring out ways to manage really large networks on something that's scaled to the size of the internet or the web becomes difficulty. So I think having these interoperable hooks, whether they be bridges, whether they be relays, whether they be services that are more integrated, you get solutions to hard problems like sharing. Like, wouldn't it be great if you could just like share posts from one social media platform to another without having to screenshot it, crop it, and then like upload it again? Like, that's so annoying, but it's so fundamental to meme culture
Whack.
and sharing culture. And you know, there everything from like multi-homing, like how many accounts do we have now on all these platforms? How do you orchestrate accounts if you're an enterprise or an organization? How do you make this stuff portable? How do you archive it, et cetera? So there's a lot of stuff that we hope gets innovated. Let me end really quickly on some things you can do to get involved. And I thank Wendy so much for pasting these links into the chat for you. So you can get updates on FreeR feeds. There's a Ghost newsletter that is being sent out whenever we have updates. Ghost also uses ActivityPub, and you can follow that newsletter. In fact, if you're on the Fediverse, we have a crowdfunder, as I mentioned. Our first dealio is really to raise money. If you want to volunteer time, which is, I think, a bigger ask than just putting some money in the tip jar, there is a form that you can fill out if you want to be a volunteer. And then the last thing, because we've already talked about RightsCon in Taipei next week, there is a session with folks from Threads, from Project Liberty, from a Mastodon, who are going to be in Taipei talking about how we build an open social web. It's on Tuesday morning, if you're on Taipei time, and we would love to have you. So thanks again for the invitation. It was really great to talk to you all.
Thank you, Mallory. Is your session at RightsCon, is that a hybrid session? Can people join remotely?
You know, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it's in person. I'm hoping it'll be recorded. I'll get back to you on that. I'll go look it up right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you for your talk. And our last but not least speaker is Boris Mann. Boris is a technologist, company founder, and community builder. He helped organize a second bar camp in Amsterdam right after the first one in the Bay Area, and has since helped spark unconference experiences in different communities and around the world. Boris is based in Vancouver and is currently exploring DWeb, open social protocols, and local first movements. Let's go, Boris.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about all the stuff that isn't Bluesky and isn't microblogging, that is really the bottoms-up app protocol community that we call the atmosphere. Next slide. So I'm kind of between things right now, and I have been involved with app protocol and Bluesky for a really long time. I'm user 22 from November 2022. One of the very early users, because some people who were in my previous team helped build a lot of the early Bluesky stuff. I started doing tech talks in August because, in part, I needed that. I needed to talk to people live about stuff that I was interested in, and I wanted to hear from them. And so I very often default to these kind of group discussions so that we can learn together. And I wanted to connect with people. So I put up this site, and by December, I really realized that we were having these really rich hangouts of developers who were in the trenches building stuff, often for the first time. We need that way to connect people, because of course we always need to connect people. And the next thing we need to do is have in-person connections to help build those strong ties, because as Mallory said, we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of things to build. And a lot of this is going to come from bottoms-up work that's both informal and informal venues like the IETF over time. Next slide. The atmosphere. So for those of you that are new to App Protocol, that is what we call the collection of all the apps and data on the App Protocol. So I'm right away going to show you something that isn't a microblog of however many characters, which is recipes. So App Protocol has a way to define lexicons or data models. And in this case, one person built a Rails app front end called recipe.exchange, which you can go to and you can log in with an App Protocol account. There's a full featured schema.org data model. I've got a screenshot of my chickpeas with garlic mousseline that I put up there. that of course sits in my own personal data server. Next slide. So there's many data types and app front ends already today run by many other people that aren't Bluesky. So that's one of the things I wanted to really highlight. We're already behind Bluesky, and we just have to keep going. The atmosphere is delightful, and you should join in. Whitewind was the original one, long-form blogging built by the Japanese community. Brian posts, I think, pretty much all of his blog posts on there, and there's really good stuff if you look up Brian's account. Smoke Signal, Nick Jarakinis, events and RSVPs. He comes from a long history of building social apps over the years, going all the way up to upcoming.org. And he said, hey, like, this is really something. Front Page is sort of a Hacker News clone. Frontpage.fyi, links plus 10,000 character chat threads. And then a super new one that just came out recently is Roomy Chat. So it's app protocol plus local first plus peer-to-peer, and it smooshes that all up together into a chat experience that looks maybe a little bit like Discord. And all of that is actually stored in your own user account where you delegate hosting to a personal data server. Many of those will be on Bluesky servers, but the same code that Bluesky runs for hundreds of thousands of accounts is something that you can run. Yes, you need to be a techie, but it's actually, if you're skilled at kind of day-to-day Linux stuff, it took me 15 minutes to set up. You've got that account wherever it's hosted, because that's the point. It's not trapped on any one particular server, and it can move around. All of these blog posts and video infos are at appprotocol.dev, the site, so you can look at those. Next slide. The hot news, the hot goss in the atmosphere right now is clones. So most of them are client apps. Many of them are native mobile or web-based that use the same Bluesky blogging lexicon. But the blogging lexicon, microblogging one, supports video attachments and image attachments, and people reconfigure the front end, and this is a screenshot from the homepage of Pink Sky, to look like Instagram. There's a bunch more. I love them all equally. I'm linking you to Pink Sky because, in fact, it has a web app, so you can go directly to it without downloading the native application. And it means that they lean on, or in fact, I'm going to say it, leech off of Bluesky's storage, video, CDN, and moderation services. Basically, probably the highest cost thing is going to be a bunch of moderation, unless we figure out ways to mix and match it for lexicons beyond microblogging. Next slide. So there's also been lots of questions of, can we make pieces of app protocol smaller? How expensive is it? Does it cost like $1 billion to run? The PDS component, which is where your user data lives, doesn't do very much, and it's super cheap. This post by Phil, aka Bad Example, has written some interesting code that basically currently has 1 billion links interconnecting the atmosphere data on a Raspberry Pi that's run at home. And there's also a bunch of other app architectures. So I'm actually super not interested about just doing more microblogging. I'm aiming for all apps. That's what I want to see in the atmosphere. Smoke Signal, which does events, as I mentioned before, doesn't have a relay at all. It actually just talks directly to PDSs where the events are stored. So there's lots of different ways to remix this. Literally new changes coming out like every single week. I am super interested in people who want to take on things like a Germany only or Canada only microblogging site. So that's another thing where it's like, oh, that would be interesting. How would that look like? How would it interoperate in further composability? And all those things are possible with this architecture. Next slide. So I covered this. I'm not going to go into this in big detail. All the data is in your account. So if I follow Brian, there's a record in my account that says follow and points to his DID. In the same way, Brian might have a record of a block pointing at me. And that's in his account. I can't stop his block. No one can, because we're all hosting our own data, which is like HTML. You host a website that has links to point to others. Someone else can't come to your website and delete it. So that's something that is hard to get to grips with, but it's a really interesting feature. and leads to a bunch of architectural things. Next slide. So I'm also a heavy ActivityPub user. With Evan Prodrimo and a bunch of other people, we founded the Co-Social Community Cooperative, which is Canadian-owned social media, running currently a Mastodon server for the last couple of years.
Quack.
And looking to run some other services there over time. One of the things on my personal list, because ActivityPub already has some of these nuanced group privacy tools, and that's not something that's going to be in App Protocol anytime soon, things like, can I run a server that is truly a community that displaces Facebook from the core of Bowen Island, my original hometown? And hometown is an interesting server that has some of those features. Next slide. So I, along with a few others, have created the App Protocol Community Fund, which is a fiscal sponsorship by the RAF Foundation. We are putting on the Atmosphere Conference because we think it's really important for all of us in the community to gather together in person. It will have talks as well as bottoms-up BOFs and unconference style discussion groups. And for this crowd, I've actually put some of those other working groups. This is the kickoff for us all working together. I just heard that Mark Fadul from Free Our Feeds is going to be able to come join us. So we'll have that discussion there as well. And my call to you is, this is all about people. Try things, pool funds, pool collaboration, gather and serve what community means to you. These digital tools are just something that help us get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Boris. I was just about to quack at you again. All right. So that concludes the portion of the presentations. And thank you so much to all of you who have joined after we fixed our Zoom limit issue. We used a new link and we fixed it, but very, very thankful that you're still able to join us today. And thank you all for such a lively chat conversation. I am barely able to keep up doing this also in the back end, fixing these issues. But I've been keeping track of some of your questions, so please keep them coming. First, though, I'd like to invite our speakers to ask a question to another speaker. So Boris, Mallory, Brian, do you have any questions you'd like to ask to each other? Yes, Boris.
Brian, private data. When will you come out of your protocol engineer hidey hole and participate in a wider set of communities attempting to build privacy at scale?
Yeah, it's a question. I mean, I use, there's a bunch of, I meant to talk about that a little bit more. I can hit it in a couple different ways. One is, I think there's just been pretty good work on privacy. Like it's not like no one's been doing this. Like there's great, Signal's really great. Signal's really, we don't want to compete with Signal. It's like kind of wasted effort. To some degree, ActivityPub does nuanced private data, as you're saying, pretty well. I don't think for that specific use case, it doesn't feel like as urgent to get in there and try to like do something. We don't need App Proto to be like a kind of like totalitarian digital protocol. It like does everything you might need to do. We want to kind of stay focused on what we're trying to do and create components that other people can borrow from. If you want to just use the identity system, you can do that. I think the strongest argument for me personally, the strongest argument for needing to do so like the two spirits, like on the one hand, it's like, why does this need to be in the same protocol at all? Like just do it separately. Have your own carefully designed by a team that really values that and thinks only about that, could have better outcomes. And use App Proto for the like broadcast, blasted out to the whole world kind of use case. I think so. That's one, I think, a somewhat defensible stance to have. I don't think that's not our team stance, but it's like a kind of approach to it. I think the case for me, the application that hits the like weird queasiness here the most is, and so question is like, do you need in the same, DMs in the same app are almost like very counterintuitively, like extremely popular. Like people really want to DM and chat in the same app, which is kind of frustrating or annoying. It's like, why don't you just link over to Signal? Like, why don't you just move to Signal? Don't do your, the Bluesky DMs are not end-to-end encrypted. They're not on protocol. They're not really doing it the right way. Move it to Signal, do it in Signal, stop it. But it's super successful to have it in the same app. The case study of this to me is like LiveJournal. And then Dreamwith being the kind of successor project to that, which is a kind of a blogging, somewhat very community, very blogging and comment oriented application, which from the beginning had pretty sophisticated granular privacy controls. And it's just different because of that, right? Like the vibe is just different. The thing that it is, you set who can view each post for every single post you make, basically. And that's a type of ecosystem and a modality you're just not going to have if you try to keep the two things completely separate. So to me personally, that application, like getting out of the microblogging world, that one application is the kind of thing I'm like, yeah, we really can't do that on App Proto today. And it's possible that's necessary. Like it's possible that it's like table stakes and you just can't do a social web protocol if you can't do that kind of thing. So I think we do want to get to that at some point, but there's tons and tons and tons of stuff to be done in the public protocol that hasn't been done. We have to figure out money. We have to figure out independent hosting, like actually having the network be heterogeneously hosted and things like that. And we haven't hit those yet. So that's kind of the short answer. We're talking about it all the time. There's a lot of, I would say from the top down, there's market pressure, right? Like it's not just like, oh, we should do this because it's the right thing. Like there's a lot of pressure on us to add.
I think the team has talked about using the IETF MLS standard for DMs potentially over time. So there's the composability beyond app protocol essentially as well, and picking and choosing.
Yeah, I'd love to just jump in on this because I feel like it's right at the intersection of the work I do on encryption and which I've done for much longer than I have social media, actually. I think that for folks like pro encryption advocates like me, that big social media platforms have implemented strong encryption in direct messages on social media has brought more and more people to encrypted messaging, whereas just 10 years ago, a vast majority of people were still using SMS and like super insecure telecommunications and not encrypted messages. So I think we've made a lot of progress in essentially like if you're going to roll out a messaging app of any kind and you aren't using encryption, like what are you actually doing? And also just to harken back, right? Like there was a pretty robust campaign that was actually gaining some traction to the point of maybe Bluster and Twitter doing encryption in DMs, right? Like we're like, yeah, we're going to do it. And then everybody was like, really? How? Like, I'm not sure you want to do that in the browser the way you have planned to. But anyway, I guess my point is I see also encrypted apps becoming a lot more like social networks and that these are growing together. In fact, I mean, Telegram is a really good example. I think I chat more in Signal now than I ever have. Part of that is because like some social media spaces have become not very useful for a lot of people. So yeah, I think the future is encrypted DMs and we're working on MLS in ActivityPub for sure.
Cool. Thank you. I have a few questions from the audience, but I want to give one more chance for the speakers to ask a question. You have one?
Boris, I was going to ask to Boris, like, what's another, beyond recipes, like, what are some applications you'd like to see? And I guess you do ActivityPub and AppProto as well. Like, what other kind of applications do you think are a better fit for ActivityPub today?
Yeah, I think this is less about fit for any of these things. We need to get beyond the Tinker Toy level of all of this software. It's underinvested in. There's new firms, including venture firms, including foundations that are wanting to put into this. I think we need to think about a lot of this stuff as roads. This goes back to a bunch of my work on open source software. I think open source software licenses are a 30-year-ago battle. The more important part is how do you fund humans to do the work? I really came to DWeb and resonated with the DWeb principles, and I really encourage everyone to read those DWeb principles. I came up with the Drupal community and did a lot of the early work there and helped found a foundation. I think foundations are an anti-pattern and have since done a lot of protocols from the bottom up. Read the DWeb principles, like really read them. We actually did a table read with the DWeb Vancouver node. And I think they're a superset of open source licenses. And I'm really thankful for Mai and others who helped create this. And if you read this, human agency over technology, distributed benefits. What does that mean? That means like people should get paid. And so that's where I want to like layer things up well. We only do the protocols to get to there, and we're going to invest and use different things for this. To my tech brethren, do not build new apps. Do not build new protocols. Do not start anything new. You shall build on app protocol or you shall build on activity pub, and that's it. Lean in.
Nice take, Boris. We always have a lot of folks who are interested. I mean, I think this conversation has also led to some debate about what the limitations are of the existing protocols. But to your point about the funding, many of the questions I've been seeing in the chat is about funding. And so there's one question for Free Our Feeds and Mallory. What is expected funding per year per user needed for Free Our Feeds to work and be sustainable? And I would tack on to that, is there a vision for having users have some type of governance control over this foundation?
Right. Those are two different questions, but I'll do my best. I mean, I think that no one has figured out how to create massive data centers and digital infrastructure for no money. So that's, we're working on that, I guess. No, but really though, I think crowdfunding is a good way to get this new organization going that can sort of act as a steward. And then hopefully we can sort of lightning rods additional funding. So I think it's really challenging to funnel money that wants to go towards alternatives and open alternatives without something that's established. This is my entire career working for nonprofit organizations. It's just what I've learned. And when you get into building things in tech space, you immediately fall into this kind of uncanny situation where the philanthropic wing doesn't necessarily want to fund you because it looks like you're building tech and that looks like a product. And then like the tech folks don't necessarily want to fund you because you aren't building a product that doesn't have a real sustainability or business model. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. There are a lot of examples out there. Internet Archive is one. Wikipedia is another. Mozilla. There's a few that we could look for. Internet Society, hopefully something like that can either fall out or we do hopefully get some support from the people who use it and find value in it. I will talk about governance by punting a bit and saying that I think the point of decentralization, and I'm going to harken back to everything Nathan Schneider has ever written on the topic, which is that, you get enough decentralization, you can start to govern things the way you want to govern them. And that's kind of the point. It's like, you don't have to worry if you don't like the person over there in that corner that's interoperating with you and the way they govern things. The point is that you have some control and you can get your hands around the infrastructure that you're running to govern it the way you and the other people that are using it want to. And there's a lot of really interesting ways to do that. And hopefully those ways that we tend to self-organize can also be reflected in the way we build the technology as well, because just blocking and reporting and content moderation, take it or leave it, like that's too flat. It's not enough. And the promise is that we can do a lot more with the technology to make governance a bit better.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to start also asking a few more questions from the audience. There's a few questions about Bluesky. Let's see. What is the business model for Bluesky since it's VC funded and for profit? And relatedly, because Bluesky is a VC-backed company, is it sharing those financial resources with other initiatives like, Free Our Feeds? I'm assuming not, but these types of other efforts. And the second question part of that is, does this just make a new way to have a lot of people doing the free work, including the people using Bluesky for just a few people's benefits? It says a la Varoufakis techno-feudalism.
Yeah.
So what is the business model and are you sharing the resources?
There's a bunch to unpack there. Like definitely money is a thing that we're happy to talk about and it's a big important thing. There's a couple different business models. We're not like fully committed down one path and like we might do multiple things. There's one, we sell domains. I should always mention that we do have some revenue that comes in from that. In some sense, the DNS system and the name system is kind of artificial scarcity. So it's like selling land that has supported the entire DNS system over time. And like potentially we can take advantage of some of that. It's maybe not the best model, but it doesn't, it's a model. We're not really banking on that right now as funding the entire enterprise. There's direct subscriptions. This is kind of like WeChat did this, or WhatsApp back in the day was like $1 a year per person. That I don't want to commit to any specific dollar amount, but like a very small per year account would cover all of our costs for at least all of the infrastructure of the operation. So some kind of direct subscription to Bluesky is something that could work as an optional thing, even if a small fraction of people subscribe to it. There's doing some form of payment transactions between people in the network and taking some amount of that to manage the fraud of it and things like that. There's providing infrastructure services to other people building other apps that have their own business model on top of it. So that's kind of like a cloud or infrastructure kind of thing. So there's like a lot of these options in the air. I think the thing we're most focused on right now is ensuring that we can sustain without having to going down the advertising path. So one reason we're not just like flushly handing out huge grants out of our VC pool is that we're very concerned about our burn rate and how much money we're spending, and that we don't have any revenue coming in. And we want to take as long as we can so that we have time to come up with an economic model that has good aligned incentives and doesn't pressure us into something that's not going to work well. We can look at the whole history of other social media companies and see how that goes. So we're very focused on trying to come up with something that's good, not just for us, but for other people in the network. It's important that other people be able to run services and be incentivized to do that and not be dependent on us. If it's just us being the sole funder of all the services in the network, that's not a very healthy, independent.
I think one of the really big challenges right now is people want everything from Bluesky. And this is an awake and aware group right here that knows about protocols and a bunch of other things like that. We both want all the benefits of like, oh, amazing, there's a competent team of humans who run a bunch of servers and do a bunch of things. And oh, as a developer, I can use everything from APIs to run my own stuff and I don't need to pay anyone. Woo. But then we also don't want them to be a company that makes money. I think this is where a lot of the tension is, right? Which is exactly why the title of this is Beyond Bluesky. It's one company. There's other companies being formed. There's other companies being funded. There are other models like cooperatives. Some of Nathan Schneider's students from the University of Colorado at Boulder, I had them on the show a couple weeks ago. I need to post that, who came up with a co-op method of doing moderation. That was really interesting. So even rather than centering a moderator with special powers, it had some interesting labeling where people would kind of vote on stuff. Doesn't matter whether it's a good or bad idea. There are challenges with it, but basically going like, oh, you can have other models, right? PDSs are really, 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 really cheap on a per user account basis to run. If you're saying, I would like a 32 million person system to be cheap, you're like, make it smaller, right? Like there's a couple of ways to slice it in different ways, and it can't all just be pointing at one company. We need a plurality of approaches.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just, there's a number of people in the call that like work on other projects. Some of them have gotten their own funding independently. That's a thing that's happened. I think a big concern for us is just making sure that there's a way not just for us to make money, but for other people in the network to make money in a sustainable way.
Mallory, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just that I am looking for the joy. I loved how you started the meeting today where you asked people what's bringing them joy, because I think that's what ultimately gets us scale and participation on the social web is people want to be there and they're excited about it. And you need creators and creatives and all kinds of folks that we need to bring to the table. But there's a sustainability question for them too, right? Like we know that people make their whole living based on what they do on social media. Their publishers, right, need social media. There are a lot of business models that already exist. The question is, how do you weave those in to the platforms that we're building in a way that is equitable, in a way that is scalable, and hopefully then, yeah, sustains like the whole ecosystem. So I don't have any specifics there, but I think that it's actually the fun and exciting part of what we're building to some degree.
Absolutely. And, you know, a big part of how we frame our DWeb events and everything is recognizing that there are the, you know, the raw protocol builders like Brian, you know, and the people who are thinking about moderation. And at the end of the day, we actually also have to ask everybody, you know, in the particular communities, how do they want to use these platforms? You know, what are the purposes? What are the types of privacy? What are the, or not, no privacy? Or what types of scale do we want to see? And that's the kind of plurality that we're not seeing, obviously, from the existing services. So that's what's exciting about having an open protocol, is enabling all of these new projects to exist. But again, because it's so hard to get these funded, you know, how do we make a system where it's not just that maybe some people are benefiting over the others, but that we kind of co-own it in some way? And obviously, democratic governance co-ops, I've seen so many that really work really well, some who don't. It's really tricky to have democratic governance because you have so many voices in the room. So it's not easy to do that, but I think that is obviously the ideal, that we have more people participating in the platforms that they use.
And I think a lot of what you're describing was already a difficulty in the web, right? Like to get the web up and going, you needed to have the same kind of plurality and you had to have these same kind of incentives. And it seemed impossible at first, but then it was achieved. And I think the other thing to remember is that we are so deep into this web now that there are huge, huge companies that have figured out ways of building walled gardens and shoring things up. And this is sort of the Cory Doctorow and shitification, right? So we have to not only build the social web in the same way that the challenges existed for building the early web days, we also have to counterbalance and fight against this like incredibly centralized ecosystem where the rules have already been stacked against us. So that's another way of thinking about like, why is this so hard and why has nobody figured this out yet? Because we're kind of doing both.
I have a question about policy too, but I don't know if we have time for that. It does seem like many of the policies that exist too have also helped create some of these walled gardens, right? Because many of these companies have essentially negotiated with policymakers to ensure that it's very expensive or, you know, very just like hard for new entrants to come in. I'd like to try and ask one more question. Someone asked, what else? Distribution and identity data redundancy. How can DID method PLC be partitioned? How can I create a backup archive of my PDS data and host it in a different DC region? That's a question for you, maybe, Brian?
Yeah. Live backing up the PDS and replicating. I don't think we have a guide for that, but you can use SQLite rsync backups are a thing, and Lightstream is a way to live replicate it. That's like super technical. The PLC directory is like a quite centralized thing right now. We're taking two approaches to this. One is we want to do a legal entity thing where we like spin it out to an independent thing. We've been doing a lot of groundwork for that, having a lot of conversations with lawyers and other organizations, trying to choose the right jurisdiction and kind of like board setup, mostly just as a temporary measure until we can get more technical stuff in play. As it is right now, it's just like it's not that big, so you can just replicate the whole database instead of sharding or partitioning it. And that's kind of the direction we'd like to go in it, is just have it be a single coherent identity thing. And there can just be, multiple replicas of it that guard against removal of accounts and things like that.
I dropped
Thank
the
you.
PLC mirror in the links, Brian.
Yeah.
All right, well, that concludes the presentation and discussion for now. Thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you so much to Caitlin and Essay and Wendy for doing all the back end and fixing the limits on the room. All right, so let me just share a couple links so you can follow up. So we are on the Fediverse at dweb@social.coop. We are on Bluesky at dweb.bluesky.social. We are soon going to have a new social media person as well, so we'll probably be more active on those platforms. We are also in Discord, which is relevant very shortly. We'll be sharing the link to that. And we are also on Matrix. We are fixing the Discord Matrix bridge. We're hopefully going to just have a complete mirror between the two, so stay tuned for that. as well as our DWeb calendar. We're working on a decentralized DWeb calendar that you can subscribe to and stay tuned for any virtual events, any happenings in our ecosystem, as well as any of the DWeb node meetups. And on that note, I've been seeing a lot of chatter about whether there are things happening in New York and other places. We do have our DWeb node network, and some of them are active than others, but if you're interested in doing a local meetup, please email us at dweb@archive.org, and we'll try and connect you with the folks that have already been organizing things or help you get set up to do more meetups in the future. So next slide. We are going to try something new today. For any of the speakers who can stay on, no pressure, we will be going to our DWeb Discord server and go into our Hangout rooms, our voice channels in Discord, and you can select a room and move between them and see who you see, chat up somebody new, say hi to someone you know, and you can keep the conversation going on Bluesky. If anyone wants to just chime in and say something they want to talk about specifically, I can assign you to a room so that other folks who want to talk about that can join you there. Thanks again to the speakers and for everyone joining, and see you next month.